Good. So let's get started. So my talk today is about the benefits and challenges of Odoo version migration. So upgrading from an earlier module Odoo version to a later one. And actually, okay. So this is my agenda for today. Um, I'll discuss what are the benefits or why should we upgrade Odoo versions? What are the benefits here? And of course, what are the challenges? And I'll discuss a bit of the how-tos or strategies to handle with these challenges. Now, this is not a technical talk, so this is not explaining how you should technically use Open Upgrade to perform these migrations. This talk focus on the business side of the migrations and how you can get the buy-in to do this, what things you should avoid, and how should you plan and should you consider to make these migrations easier and lower the risk behind them. So starting on first thing to note is that Odoo has a stable policy of 3 years support. This means that right now Odoo 14 was just released this month. This means that with the release of Odoo 14, Odoo 12 and 13 are still supported. So these are the last three versions supported. That's the Odoo policy. And Odoo 11 is out of support right now. So if you or your customers are running an Odoo 11 database, it's not supported by the vendor, meaning that it doesn't get any fixes, bug fixes, or security patches. And if you look at it, time flies. And 2017 is not that far ago. And the clock keeps ticking. And sooner or later, you'll face with this deprecation. And you really need to think about migration. So this 3-year life cycle, if you think about 3 years, it's a lot of time, but then it flies by and it's not that long before you reach the 3 years and you have a deprecated system. So this is a concern. Now, what are the reasons we should move to a new version? So actually, there's two kinds of reasons. You have the carrot and you have the stick. On the carrot side, and sometimes this is a driver, there are new apps available on newer Odoo versions. Like right now, a lot of people that saw the new spreadsheet features on version 14 or the new website feature on version 14, and they have an e-commerce shop or the website is important for their business. We're more decentralized than before, and those are important features. So maybe a lot of people there are wanting to go into version 14 fast because of that. So that's one of the benefits you can. It's that you have available new apps. Same thing happened with version 13 and version 12 with uh, the 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 documents that were automatically encoded into invoices, or you you had the signature app and document manage app in the enterprise editions. So plenty of new apps that may be interesting and may just justify the move. Also, not least, there are significantly improved features in modules like manufacturing and inventory and accounting. They come up, have enhanced features that can help businesses or can help with blocking points, current blocking points. So this is the carrot, and you also have the stick that I already referred. So if you get out of official support, you don't benefit from upstream bug fixes, and worse than that, you don't benefit from security patches. So if your system could be at risk at the security side, and if your system, like a lot of them today, are exposed in the internet, that's something you should really worry about. Here in the middle, it's between the carrot and the stick are performance improvements. This was a good reason, for example, a lot of companies sought to move on to Odoo 13 because there were significant performance improvements in the core. And for version 14, we had also announced significant improvements on the website side. And if I remember correctly, there was at some point one newer Python version that had some operations would run faster, and it would get you some improvements on performance too. So with time, there are general performance improvements in Odoo that you can take benefit from. Now, another reason you should keep the upgrade in your agenda is chrono depth. Chrono depth is technical depth associated with just time passing by, because systems rot. Even if you're not changing them, with time they deteriorate. And it seems like this is software is an abstract thing. It does not deteriorate, but it's not true. You all know with time, systems deteriorate because the stack you're based on is getting old, is getting unsupported. If it's not Odoo itself, it's the database, it's out of support, or the operating system you're running on, or the Python version you're running on, or the libraries you're relying on. So software is constantly moving, and what everything that stopped is rotting and it's deteriorating. So chrono depth, just standing still on the same place, is like moving backwards on the software world. And you're accumulating technical debt. And what happens when you accumulate too much technical debt? You have risk. It can blow up on your hand. So you need to regularly look back at your technical debt and try to clean it up. And a big item in this list for when it comes to Odoo is the version you are and how old it is. And considering upgrading it to a newer version, it's the way to clean up that portion of your technical debt. So, but again, there are other kinds of technical debt that also act as blockers. So it's not just not doing anything. There are the things we did before and the shortcuts you took earlier on. You're going to pay the debt for that later on. That's actually the definition of technical debt. It's the price you pay later for having some shortcuts earlier on. So you rushed your project to meet the release timeline you had agreed before, and you took some shortcuts there. You'll pay that debt when you get to the next migration. So one blocking point for migrations is this. You probably don't have good design docs that reliably describe your current system. So the problem you have with the migration is that it's not clear for you what features your system is supposed to provide, or even better yet, what problems, business problems, your system is expected to solve. So if you don't know that, how are you going to be aware if the upgraded system is behaving properly, right? So you eventually have custom modules, and you don't know exactly what features they're provided because of design docs are not clear, and you know to what problems they are solving. So you don't know what they are useful for. You're not sure a lot of times. And the custom modules, they are not readable, meaning that, okay, not having the design docs, let's look at what they do. A lot of times we find that the way they are implemented is not readable. They work, but you open the code and it's not clear what they're doing because the code is written in a confusing way. So that doesn't help fix the first part. If at least you don't have the documentation, but the code is very clean, it's a lesser evil and you can understand what it's doing. But we see a lot of times that that's not what happened with the code that was implemented. And another problem we usually see in the custom modules is that the implementation of the custom modules relies on one or a small set of big modules that do a lot of things. When you have this, it's not clear the separation between the several features. You don't know where a feature begins and where it ends. It's a bit a spaghetti. The best practice is to divide these large models into smaller ones. But if you do that up front when you're designing, you don't have a bigger effort and you can reap the benefits later on. The benefit of smaller modules is that they have a clearer frontier. So you know what the model does, what it relies on others to help them do achieve, and it's smaller and easier to understand, and the relationships with the other modules are clearer. So this monolithic design is something we find, and when these kind of modules face their first migration, they're a big problem and they need to be rewritten. So if as the custom module implementation, you have these issues, this is technical debt, you're going to pay off before your first migration. So the good news is that if you do it properly, you won't suffer that much on the second or the third migration because you'll be prepared for that. And I'll discuss a bit more on that. Now, the second thing is the business workflows, because your Odoo system or your ERP is not just about code and modules and what apps are installed and what even configuration settings are there. The whole point is to support the business workflow, like from the sale to the invoice to the delivery, all these workflows. It should be clear to you what are the main business workflows supported and how they are mapped to the Odoo standard features and where the custom modules come in to fill the gaps that are specific to your business. So this is, I would call it a business blueprint. So it's how you map your, it's not every small process you have in the company, but at least the big processes, because this is how you will validate that the migrated system is fulfilling the business needs. And this is also neat because you need a broader picture um, of the new version will have different features from this previous version. There are new features there. Sometimes Odoo deprecates some features, and you need to know if these new features are useful, if maybe they make some of the custom models you designed for the earlier version, maybe they make them obsolete and you can drop those modules, or maybe you need to do something different with your process. Or there's even the case where the custom model developed before, after all, it was not such a great idea, and you probably are better off dropping it with some adjustments to your procedures. Or you don't operate that way anymore, and that custom module developed 3 years ago doesn't make sense right now. It's probably even a hindrance for your users, and everyone is better off if you just get rid of it. So the blockers for a migration, they are not only technical on what you did on implementation, they're also related to the clarity you have on how your system is supporting your business. So this leads us to the challenges for the migrations. I think I went through this on the previous slide. And the questions we should make ourselves, so what are my business flows from order to pay, from purchase to pay, on the manufacturing side? So what are my key workflows? And what are my existing customizations? So how do they fit my business workflow? Are these customizations still relevant, and can I drop them? and what are the new features relevant from the new Odoo system I'm installing, like Odoo 13 or D14. What are the new features there, and are they relevant? Should I incorporate them in my business flows? Should they deprecate an existing customization? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves. And I can add this last one. Maybe this is unexpected. So I should reassess my customizations. Can I move some of my customizations to community modules? Maybe I can extract 80% of the code and make it a generic feature that would also be helpful for other businesses in an industry similar to mine. And just leave that 10 or 20% that are too specific for me in a custom module. And then I release my custom code base significantly. And at the same time, I contribute to the community, because odds are I'm already running a lot of community modules on my installation. So I can, a good way to pay back is to give back something. So, and this is also out of self-interest, because modules that are contributed to the community, in particular to the OCA, are much easier to maintain and are cheaper to maintain. And there's a chance, if they're good modules, they're useful, that other people are doing bug fixing for you for free, or even migrating them to the new versions. So you do the first step and share your code, and in 1 or 2 years from now, when you're ready to migrate, probably someone already took care of migrating this model to the later version, and you don't have any work. So suddenly, the code base with heavy maintenance burden of custom models is reduced significantly. So this should be something that you should consider. Reassess your customizations. Do they have to be customizations? Or maybe it can also happen. What was a customization from me 2 years ago, now there's a community model implementing something the same or very similar, and I could just drop my custom module and adapt my workflows to use the new community module. So there's a lot of things to reassess periodically that can help us make. So I'm working on this migration, but I'm also doing steps that will make my life much easier 1 or 2 years from now, when I'll go through the next migration. I think the biggest challenge is when you face the first one and you're not ready. When you understand this is a cycle and you'll do this repeatedly, you're ready, and you have your checklist, and you know what to look for, and you'll know how things should be handled. So this is your upgrade checklist. Um, when you're going through the migration process, this is what you should do. The first thing you should do is migrate your custom modules to the new version. And when I say migrate the custom modules, I actually found that it's easier to first blindly migrate all your code base. This might be false if you have ugly code base, but you can consider migrating all models just to get the new system running out of the box of these modules, and then reassess if you should drop code. If your modules are well built and they are easy to port, this what I'm saying is a good approach. If not, you should really assess what of these custom models need to be migrated to the next version. So I hope you're not in the second case. That means that your code base has a lot of technical debt. Now, you should also migrate community modules. So this means looking at the community, see what are the modules that are already migrated, search for the modules you're using that probably are under migrating by someone else, and help them, at least with a code review, to help them merge that migration. Or if the module was not migrated by anyone, do it yourself and contribute upstream to the migration effort of the community modules. So this is part of your workflow. Then you should run the migration process. I'm not telling you which one. So this works both for open upgrade and for the Odoo enterprise migration process. So this is like a process where it gets a old database in, and it gets a new migrated database out, and then you need to run the next steps. From a business person point of view, it's really not relevant if it's open upgrade or something else. But you run the technical migration process, and then this is the hard part. You need to test if the custom features are behaving as properly. Basically, if the new version of the custom modules still works as expected. To do this, you need to know what they are expected to do, right? Sounds obvious, but not so obvious. Um, Next is you need to test the business flows. So you need to know if the process from beginning to end and the most relevant variations of it, like the delivery, the data return from the customer, whatever is the specific, maybe the e-commerce and the payment process on the e-commerce shop, whatever is your particular process, you need to test them and see if they continue working as expected, and if there are um, uh, possible improvements you see there of the new version brings new challenges to you. And for this, again, it goes back to the business mapping. You need to know what are these business workflows. If you don't have that information structured, you have quite some effort ahead of you. The thing is, if you do this properly, again, you'll be ready for the next migration because you have that written down and you only need to update it because of any changes on the way you are operating 1 or 2 years from now. And part of these tests, you should evaluate the features to deprecate. So remove code is good, simplify your process is good. So this is a good opportunity to reassess and reevaluate your business. So this is not a moment where you shave off a good part of your technical debt and your chrono debt. It's also a good form to shape up your system and make it fitter for your current operations. So here my tagline here would be, today when you're doing this, you are thinking also what you'll need to know when starting migration tomorrow. So you're doing this work because you want to migrate now to version 14 or 13, but you're doing it in should be doing it in a way that it will make it a lot easier when you're doing that again 1 or 2 years from now. That would be my key message. So you're not thinking on the short term, you think on getting a machine running that helps you in the future on the next migration, because it will happen at least every 3 years, or they should happen at least every 3 years. And there might be benefits you see on new versions that might you want to do at even a faster pace of 1 or every 2 years. And this is it. So I'm open for questions.
We have a bunch of questions, Daniel. Virginie has been awesome. She's been firing away and been very patient, Virginie. Thank you. Her first question was about how to do the gap analysis between versions. There's no detailed release notes, especially for community edition. So how do you decide which new version you should migrate to?
Okay, so there are several ways to do that. So my safest answer is, you know your business workflows and you try them out and you compare. So you get experienced people with the current workflows, you get them running the same workflows on the new system, and you evaluate from there. This is not a very structured way, but this plus the not very detailed release notes, but at least they point you the areas there are improvements or changes at. So with those two things together, you should be able to figure it out. If you have a more technical capabilities, you can look at there's a detailed difference of a report of the technical changes in the open upgrade project. So when a new release is made, the open upgrade team runs a tool that does a technical comparison between the two versions of Odoo and spits out for each module text files with all the fields at the field level, at the view level, what exact changes were made. So this might be overwhelming for many. Maybe it's too much detail, so it's the other extreme really. But if it's a really important area for you, like if you are really worried about manufacturing or inventory, it might be worth looking at it. And if you have some technical background. So that would be my answer for that. But it's really, there's some trial and error here.
Excellent. Thank you. Great answer. And so her second question is about the cost of migration. What message should she be giving to her customers? Should they budget the project cost every 2 to 3 years? What's the rhythm of migrations? What do you think is best practice from your experience?
Um, so that's a difficult question. Odoo themselves have an answer for that. So they're trying to sell a a monthly fee that would cover after 1 year would automatically allow for this for the migration cost of the system. So based on your custom code base, you pay an X amount computed with some kind of formula based on the custom lines of code you have. And if you pay that for at least 1 year, then you're entitled for the migrations, including your custom code. I think everyone, that's general knowledge. So that's actually an interesting formula, and I see what Odoo is trying to do here. What they're trying to do here is, it's a problem you described. So customers, they don't like this big price tag on every 2 or 3 years that they need to spend to do a migration, to basically have a system that keeps doing the same things as before. So they see like an expense to have no improvement on the system. What I try to give you some arguments, it's not just like that. You're cleaning up technical debt. So you're paying out the debt there, even if it's just chrono debt. But again, at the beginning of the discussion, the business owner or the CEO or the CIO, he might not see that. He might see just an expense that is forced because of this too fast deprecation cycle. Um, Now, the regular ways, the customer won't want to pay you like a monthly fee if you ask them for that. I don't think they would do that. Maybe they could agree with the Odoo approach. If you try that yourself, I don't think it would work. So the best thing I would advise is to try to avoid your technical debt. So try to keep some documentation on the key processes, like I showed in the presentation, and try to keep your models clean. When you write your model, think about, so 2 years from now, will this be easy to understand and if test on a new system and migrate? So that's the best way for your customer to not have a big, expensive upgrade regularly. And if you do this properly on the next migration, hopefully you can reduce a lot this cost in the other iterations later on. And the thing is, the trend is for these migrations to happen faster and faster. On the Odoo experience, Fabien mentioned about the goal of having rolling releases. So Odoo could be releasing, stop making big releases and doing small releases very regularly. And we will need to adapt to that. And if you consider that scenario, then you really need to be ready at your custom module level to be up to this and to keep up to this. And that means continuous integration, automatic testing, include tests written in your custom models and automatic testing and all that. We need to up our game to be able to be faster and be more flexible. I hope I answered the question.
Great answer. Really wise counsel, Daniel, that as you are developing modules, to think, how am I going to migrate this? And also, like you say, very much like Tesla, where they're constantly upgrading, and Salesforce, where they send out three upgrades a year, and the customer doesn't even know the experience. You buy a new Tesla car today, it might be very different from the one that they sold just 2 or 3 months ago. And Virginie has a couple of extra questions. We'll have time. We have 7 minutes left before Rodrigo starts his presentation. Is it okay to leave a customer on an old non-supported version? What would be the risks for the customer and for you as his Odoo partner that is advising him and providing that implementation service?
So it's not an ideal situation. In some cases, it might be the best, or it might be the least of, considering several bad scenarios, it could be the least of them. The important thing for you is to advise your customer on the risks of doing so. So, and usually that happens because the technical depth is so high that is a too large barrier for the migration. We see that in older implementations where there are a lot of customizations. So we see sometimes consultants that go in and they don't know how Odoo works, and they just implement modules, custom modules doing things that could have been configured by in Odoo and work out of the box if the consultants knew how Odoo could be configured. So I've seen this in the past, and what you have then is a system that's very hard to upgrade because you have this huge code base. And in those cases, it's probably cheaper to re-implement the system. And so start up a new version 14, and I go back to the business analysis and to the gaps analysis. And so go open a new system instead of migrating, re-implement one with what you already know about the business. So you have something to help you is that since this business is somehow encoded in the old system, it's explicitly there. It's easier to find how it should work. You have something you can compare to and try to implement in the new system. So maybe that's the best way to get those customers out of these older and unsupported versions. But they need to be ready for that, and there's also, of course, some cost of doing this. So
Yes, we have one customer that is on Odoo version 6 because they have a million SKUs and they've done so many customizations. It's very difficult for them to think about migration.
yeah,
So great
at
answer,
this
Dan.
point for that customer, it's cheaper to think of a new pro implementation project than to think on a migration. And migrations work from one version to the other. So for version 6, it's not one migration. It's 7, 8, 9. It's 5, 6, or 7 migrations in one release, right?
Oh, yeah. No, exactly. And so her last questions are, when we go to a new Odoo version, is it possible to discover after the migration that something disappeared? The customer didn't identify it as a feature, so we didn't make sure it was still there in the new version. This is Virginie's question. What would be your advice to avoid this kind of situation? So, for example, creating a negative invoice in version 9 is not possible in version 12. And we have had this. We've had customers that very much relied on a feature in version 11 or something, and then all of a sudden, when they went to version 12, Odoo, the core functionality disappeared. So how do you kind of soothe that?
So those kind of things, there's no 100% plan for that. So that happened because something was not properly addressed in the planning and the testing phase. And that's really easy to happen because it's not possible to test everything very deeply when you're deploying it. Otherwise, it really it escalates the cost of the project, right? So that can happen. So you really should cover for the 80-90% processes that are the key most important, and be ready to be reactive to the ones that are missing. And the good thing about having a strong community around Odoo is that you're probably not alone with that problem. So if you go to the forums, if you go to the OCA mailing list and ask the question, you'll find other people with the same problem. And odds are a solution for it can be built collaboratively and quickly. So this, I think the big answer for that is responsiveness and collaboration with the other people, because like again, you're not the only one with that problem for sure. More people will have it. Uh, a second idea is don't go too fast into a new version. So Odoo 14 was just released. Don't run to install it. Let it cool down for a couple of months and pay attention to what people are saying about the new version, because this will come up pretty quickly. Hopefully on people that are implementing, starting projects in version Odoo 14, not on people migrating. So if you wait for 2-3 months, you'll probably have a good idea of these unexpected consequences, and you can plan accordingly in your migration project.
Excellent answers, Daniel. That was fantastic. And that brings us up to the close of your presentation. I want to thank you so much. So informative and really helpful for everybody that's going through this anxiety about migration. Really very, very good good thought leadership there. Thank you, Daniel.